In 2016, I lived through one of the best moments in my life when my first niece was born. To welcome her into the world, I went shopping. I wanted to get her a little welcome kit. And I got to this beautiful store, and I got her items from the girls' aisle and from the boys' aisle. I didn't want to box her in. I wanted her to feel from the very beginning that the whole world was available to her and that she could explore herself and the world freely and fully. 3 years later, another incredible moment when my first nephew was born. Same joy, same desire to celebrate, same store. I love that store. But this time around, despite the fact that I'm queer and that I spent years unlearning gender stereotypes, I could not bring myself to buy him anything from the girls' aisle. I walked out of that store with an impossibly cute aviator bomber jacket. That's right. The first gift I gave to my nephew was a miniature piece of military clothing. That's when a light went on in my head. With my niece, I'd been bold enough to break tradition and offer her an invitation to explore both the world outside, and her inner world. But with my nephew, the only journey I was inviting him to was outward. Why? I realized that in recent years, the space we offer girls to explore who they are has thankfully expanded. But for boys, that space has remained the same. The perimeter of that space is lined with barbed wire. And running along that wire at high voltage is shame. Between elementary and middle school, boys are faced with a very tough choice. Either conform and give up a huge chunk of their self-expression, or risk being mocked and humiliated. Boys learn very early that all it takes to feel the shock of shame is showing up at school with an object in the wrong color, or using their voice or their hands in a way that feels different. Girls can have sleepover parties, they cuddle with each other, they do each other's hair. But boys learn very early that the only way they can safely experience physical and emotional comfort is by having a girlfriend. 2 years ago, I went to visit a friend who had just gotten out of prison. The worst time, he told me, was during COVID. For 2 years, he said, I have not touched and I have not been touched by anyone. On Thursday mornings, he told me, when my mom came to visit, I'd put my hand on the glass and I could feel nothing. My heart broke. And I thought, how many men, even outside of prisons, live a version of the same sentence? How many of them are trapped by a culture that taught us that tenderness is not manly and that kindness is a weakness? We often hear about toxic masculinity, but I invite you to stop using that phrase, because there is nothing toxic about boys and men. What is toxic are some of the narratives we built around what it means to become a man. The good news is we can change them. For years, I worked on girls' empowerment, and I traveled the world meeting many families. And many parents asked me, what about boys? Well, for a long time, that question really annoyed me. I thought that those parents wanted to take something away from girls. It took me years to understand that they didn't want to take anything away from girls, but they wanted to be part of that change. They wanted to raise their sons differently, but didn't know where to start. At that point, I started to think about what I could do to help. And I thought, well, if I am going to write a book for boys, I have to give them the same level of trust that I gave girls. At that point, I had to admit something really difficult. A part of me didn't trust boys. A part of me believed that they are naturally less empathetic, naturally more aggressive. But if I rejected the notion that girls were naturally submissive, how could I accept that boys are naturally dominant? Could it be possible, I thought, that just like we created a culture of submission for girls and women, we created a culture of domination for boys and men? At that point, I started studying the formation of the masculine identity from an anthropological, sociological, and psychological standpoints. And then I went back to study the fossils of human culture, fairy tales. Fairy tales are incredibly interesting cultural objects because they contain the inner layers, the first ideas that we develop about what to expect from the world and what the world expects from us. So I studied the portrayal of male characters in traditional fairy tales, and I discovered three very interesting things. The first one is that Prince Charming is not a character, but a narrative function. Cinderella, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, they're all different characters, but Prince Charming is always the same. That means that for every girl that learned to wait around to be saved by a prince, there is a boy that with the same stories learned that he's either saving the princess or he doesn't have a reason to be in the story. The second thing that I learned is that male characters in traditional fairy tales are portrayed as completely lacking an inner life. We know that Cinderella is sad, that her stepsisters are jealous, but what do we know about the emotion of male characters? Take Snow White's father. He loses his wife, he marries an evil woman who tells him to kill his only daughter, and what do we know about what he feels? Absolutely nothing. The third thing that I learned is that when male characters show their inner turmoil, their inner pain, they are ostracized, they are pushed away from the community, and they live miserable, lonely lives. Think of the Beast in Beauty and the Beast, or the Hunchback of Notre Dame. This kind of narrative persists in more contemporary stories like superhero stories. Think of Batman. Superheroes are basically men who must save the world because they are incapable of saving themselves. Basically, just like we told girls that they were not equipped to take care of their material needs, we told boys they are not equipped to take care of their emotional needs. So how can we marvel at the fact that so many grown men lack the basic skills to understand and process their emotions when this is still the kinds of stories that we're telling boys? Just like we did with girls, we must offer boys a much wider space to explore who they are, not just the world around them, but their inner worlds. And we must offer them different role models, not heroes made of steel, but human beings capable of navigating fear, rejection, frustration, without resorting to destructive behaviors. This is not the time to condemn masculinity. This is the time to reclaim it as a space full of love, connection, and joy. It turns out that those parents asking, "What about boys?" were right. Gender equality, after all, was never meant to be a war, but rather a journey of mutual liberation. So today, my message for boys and men is very clear and simple. Stop trying to conquer the world and grow passionate about conquering yourselves, because we cannot build a better world without your full hearts, and we cannot build a new world without you.